What's up, guys? Coming at you with Deconstruction episode 5. And just want to kind of talk today off the cuff. Going to talk a little bit about my journey regarding unwanted sexual behavior, emotions, and then boundaries and how that operates within the church, or how boundaries don't exist within the church, better yet. So I thought a good place to start would be talking about therapy and how that really was a springboard for a lot of realizations that I had. So I mentioned a little bit about therapy and just going to therapy and seeing myself and working on being a dad in one of my earlier episodes. But I wanted to expand on that, maybe talk about it from a little bit of a different perspective. I think what therapy did for me was allow me to start respecting emotions, respecting my emotions. I remember when we first went to see our therapist when I was married. It was very awkward for me. She was very caring, and she did a therapy called emotion focused therapy. And I had researched EFT before, but I didn't really understand what it was or the purpose of it. And so I resisted it at first. I think trying to feel my own emotions, or just even the therapist being emotional, made me uncomfortable. And when things make us uncomfortable, we really should look at that as a notification to look deeper. It should always make us curious. And after a little while, it did. After a little while, I started realizing that I did not respect emotions. Words like safety and feeling and things like that were kind of annoying to me. But beneath that was a little kid who was trying to compensate for not having those things. So of course I build the brick wall around myself and feel like those things are unnecessary or stupid or whatever. It's real dangerous when you start respecting your emotions, because you're basically taken to a part of yourself that really opens your eyes to a lot of things. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I don't think Christianity is a big respecter of emotions. There are so many quotes about the heart is deceitfully wicked, Jeremiah 17:9. Who can understand its ways? And there's this takeaway and misinterpretation of that verse, by the way, that is basically that emotions are bad, logic is good, and that's BS. That's not even what that verse is designed to communicate. I did a post about that last year on Facebook. Anyway, so I started respecting emotions probably 2018, 2019. And what I started to see, the deeper I dug down that rabbit hole, is that a lot of people don't A lot of people aren't really aware of how suppressed emotions are affecting them. And so I just started thinking about that in the context of my own story and my own childhood, in just the lineage of my parents and my family, and just kind of saw that it was generational. This isn't to point anybody specifically out, because everybody tries their best with what they have. But we can honor somebody, but also be honest. And that was my goal in looking into my family history, was just letting myself look honestly at the past. Because I had to start making sense of some of my issues. Issues that we have come from something deeper. And that walk between honor and honesty is actually a concept from a book by Jay Stringer, who's actually a sex therapist. And he's a Christian. He's a Reformed minister, I think somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. Anyways, somebody recommended that book to my ex-wife, and she recommended it to me. And that book really took emotional awareness to the next level. So that book that I read was called Unwanted. It's about unwanted sexual behavior. And so the premise is that if we have unwanted sexual behavior in our lives, basically something that we can't stop, whether it's going out and cheating on a spouse, physically looking at pornography, any type of sexual action that one wants to stop but doesn't feel like they can. That's unwanted sexual behavior. There's so many attempted remedies at this in Christianity, and they all suck. But this book changed my life in that way. Basically, the whole idea is that in Christianity, we've made sexuality so black and white and so taboo, that we suppress that energy, and we don't ever get to the core of why we have unwanted sexual behavior, because we're just looking at the outside. We're not digging in further. And so one of the exercises in this book was to actually think about your sexual fantasies and dig into those. And immediately, as I did those exercises, I knew right where these behaviors were coming from. The alignment of these fantasies with unmet needs that I had, and things that I had seen up to that point in life were uncanny. And to use an analogy, it was like I met my inner child in a room in my heart. And my inner child was screaming. He had been screaming at me for years, this emotional part of me. And as I let myself go into that room, I just broke down and I cried and I cried and I cried. And this room of my heart was just a mess. There were boxes everywhere. It was a disaster. This younger version of Russ was just a mess. I mean, imagine a child stuck in a room for days on end. And that was a part of me that I had locked away. And that was the part of me that was ravaging me when it came to sexual behavior. I didn't even know it. It was locked away in my subconscious mind. I had suppressed it because it was too painful to not have those needs met earlier in life. So that's what we do. We push it into our subconscious mind and we pretend it doesn't exist, but that energy is alive and well. And it manifests itself in ways that you don't want it to. And so I started seeing the connection between my unwanted sexual behavior and some of my unmet emotional needs up to that point. And the attempt was that the concept is not to blame other people. It's just to look honestly about, where these desires are coming from. We all have desires. And it's just digging into earlier in life and figuring out where the core of these, energies are. It's a cop out to say, oh, it's just sin nature. And I took that position of, oh, it's my sin nature for years. That didn't do shit, right? But once I dug down and realized where these energies were coming from, as I'll call them, I started making real progress. And for me, it wasn't highly addictive, but it came up through my marriage, and it came up earlier in life. It was pornography. And so it made me pause, because what I started to see was, okay, I have unwanted sexual behavior, and my parents stayed together. So why am I experiencing having to heal my childhood self if my parents stayed together? They stayed married. Because I was always taught that you destroy children if you divorce. And, the best thing for them is if parents stay together. Well, in some cases that can be true, but I started to realize that was a lot more nuanced than I had previously seen. Couples can stay together all they want, and they can still destroy their kids emotionally if they're not emotionally conscious themselves and if they're suppressing a ton of shit. And this can be generational. So it's not divorcing that's the big deal. Divorce can be a big deal. I mean, it can hurt children, and I'm not saying that flippantly, that it's not divorce. I'm just saying there are other things that can cause just as much, if not more, problems in future generations. If your children watch you suppress your emotional energy and your emotional needs and be miserable in a marriage, they know. And they're going to carry that forward. So you can't just shove things under the rug for the sake of abiding by an external rule, so you're quote unquote okay in the sight of God, and not expect not to damage your kids if you're not actually dealing with underlying issues. And that's what I started to see, is that there was generational trauma that had been passed down to me. And it just really rewrote the narrative on, divorce in general, marriage in general. And I started to see a lot more nuance and complexity. It is very complex. So the main thing I want to say is that just staying married doesn't mean your kids turn out okay with great marriages. It just doesn't. And I chose to get a divorce after a lot of thought, a lot of reflection, a lot of pain, and a lot of really digging into the fact that it's a lot more complex than just staying married or getting divorced. And you start to realize that the church is okay with you pulling it off on the outside. They really are. As long as you're behaving in a certain way, you can fly under the radar. You can have all kinds of shit going on beneath the scenes. Lots of emotional suppression, lots of issues. But as long as you're doing certain things, you can be a high flyer in that culture. But one thing that's very lacking in Christianity at large is emotional health and emotional awareness, especially when it comes to divorce. And I don't want to get into divorce too much because I'm going to talk about this in a, I think it might be the next episode. Yeah, the next episode. But I'm just bringing it up right now to make a point about emotional awareness, because for Christians, if there's not adultery and there's not abandonment, you can't get a divorce. That's how most view it. More progressive churches are now starting to see physical abuse and even some emotional abuse as a legitimate grounds for abandonment, which is, it's progress, but most don't. And a lot of churches give it lip service to those things, but not in practice. They don't really practice that. So one thing that just doesn't exist in Christianity is emotional barometers and emotional respect and emotional health. Because most people are emotionally suppressed. I mean, and let's face it, if your view of God is that if you don't do what he says and believe in a very specific way, that you're going to be punished for forever, it's not surprising that you're emotionally suppressed. You have to suppress real parts of yourself to accept the idea that God is going to punish the majority of humanity forever. That's just a fact. You have to suppress parts of yourself to be okay with that. And so, everything works together as a package when it comes to the church in many cases. The reason we're able to go on like robots for years and years and years without ever feeling is because no one actually wants you to feel. Because if you start really feeling, you start asking harder questions that they don't want you to ask. And lastly, I wanted to talk about boundaries. So in alignment with the ignorance of emotional health is a major lack of boundaries. Leaving evangelicalism often feels like trying to fend off a needy ex-girlfriend. People who called themselves your friends will berate you with text messages, Facebook messages, Instagram messages telling you to repent, blah, 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 blah. Not in a kind way, in a direct, aggressive way. And when you block them, they comment on other videos. They email you. They try to contact you in other ways. And it's just evidence that there's no boundaries in the church. There's no emotional awareness. People think they have a right to enter your space and project because you're part of the same body. But it's highly unhealthy. No one in any other circle in modern culture would be okay with that. These are the things that you get restraining orders for. And so it just all links together. And when you start seeing more emotional maturity outside church walls, it just encourages you to deconstruct more, especially when Christians are hurling rocks at you. They're projecting. It's obvious that they're projecting their own insecurity about seeing the world different than they do. You can tell, you can just see, once you become emotionally conscious and aware, you can see how unsafe you're making them feel and that they're getting angry. You can feel their energy, and they just act abrasively, again, like a needy ex-girlfriend. It's so fucking weird. And it just makes you be like, okay, like I'm doing the right thing, like walking away from this crazy ass culture. Like, this is fucking insane. Leave me the hell alone. Like, what is wrong with you? And so the main purpose, I'm rambling, I'm a little rambly tonight, but the main thing that I wanted to say is that the generational emotional suppression leads to all kinds of shit. It leads to repressing yourself and your body wanting to use sexuality and unhealthy outlets to try and heal and suppress those unmet needs. Um, there's no emotional awareness when it comes to more complex issues like divorce and what's actually going on. Nobody gives space for nuance or how something unfolded. They just think they know. They project themselves on you and, oh, you're getting a divorce, and I heard this and that, therefore, oh, you're wrong, and you need to go work it out with your wife. Well, fuck you. You don't know like what's happened. People just want to throw what's happening in their little box of assigning meaning to what's going on, so that it fits in with their a priori assumptions and they can move forward assuming that they're right. It's really that simple. People don't have time for nuance. They don't have time for complexity. They're not emotionally mature enough for it. And so they just go on about their merry way. Oh, Russ is, doing this for these reasons because he just wants to go out and sin. Fuck you. You have no idea. Okay? If that's what you said, or if that's something that you messaged me, fuck you. You don't have any idea what I've been through, especially if you haven't talked to me. So if that's your approach, is just assuming, you can just go fuck yourself right off a cliff. I don't care. The thing about starting to respect emotions and your own emotions is that you don't let people treat you like shit anymore either. So as hard as deconstruction's been for me, I've accepted that I'm weeding people out of my life that don't really care and aren't emotionally safe for me. That's okay. It hurts. It sucks. God, it hurts so bad. But at the end of the day, I'm building a safer circle of friends that are really going to be there for me. Not just because I say or do this thing or believe this thing. The people that I'm surrounding myself with now just love me for me, regardless of what I do or believe. And those are the people that I want around me. I want people around me that can respect boundaries, that can respect me when I ask for something, and don't think they have a right to interject themselves into my life however and whenever they want. I'm done with that. So the benefit of all of this is that in deconstruction, when you start to see these patterns, you're able to start building much better friendships, much more healthy environment for yourself. And guess what? Things like sexuality, you can start to view in a healthy manner. Instead of all the pretending, all the spirituality and acting like you have it together, when reality, you're constantly having that energy pour out in unhelpful ways, whether it's pornography or something else. I've talked about this before. This is why pastors fucking cheat so much. Because it's not real. When you're suppressing emotional energy, it's not real and it's not sustainable. You can't do it. It doesn't work that way. The energy and motion, the emotions will eventually take over. Somehow, some way. They will affect your life in a negative way if you ignore them. So what you start to learn when you learn about yourself emotionally and you start respecting your emotions is that you have a shadow side, and that shadow side is a side of you. It's a side of you that goes against your ego and your morals and what you feel is right. And if you don't let that part of you seep out in healthy ways, in ways that you're in control of, and you just pretend it's not there, it will seep out in ways that fuck your life up. So this has been a more rambly video, but the main thing I wanted to emphasize is that one of the main reasons I've deconstructed is because I found a lot more emotional awareness and health outside the church walls. And that doesn't necessarily mean Christianity isn't true in and of itself, but it's something that makes you pause. It's something that makes you look backwards and at all the fundies throwing their rocks at you and just say, like, peace out. Like, why the hell would I come back to you? I had a guy comment on my Twitter the other day and say, stop blaming, this is your fault, repent and come back. And I was like, fuck you, why would I come back to you? You think I want to give you a hug? Like, get the fuck away from me. It's just absolute nonsense. Like, the way that you win people is through kindness and love and compassion and trying to understand. And when the people that claim to really have those things demonstrate by their actions that they don't know compassion from their 5 fingers, that was stupid. That they don't know anything about compassion, you prove their inconsistency. So I hope this is helpful to anybody out there who is going through deconstruction and struggling with people from their past life or just within Christianity who don't understand. They're going to project. They're going to project their views on you. They have to keep themselves safe. They have to justify their own participation in that culture. And it's just part of it. It sucks. So, but there's so much life to be found in emotional awareness. All the things that bring sexual healing because you're not suppressing, and healthy boundaries. Life is so much better on the other side. So this is another thing that's really influenced my deconstruction, is seeing these patterns be more congruent with folks who are emotionally conscious in a way that most Christians aren't. And it just makes you continue down the path of deconstruction. So next time I'm going to be talking about just biblical perspective on divorce and the death of my ego. My ego had to die for me to get a divorce because so much of my identity was tied up in not divorcing. How could Russ McCary be someone who had a divorce on his record? It's deeply embedded in us. So I'll get into more detail about that next time. I hope some of the points in this video were helpful. I love you guys. If you have any questions or need help, my email is on the About page of my YouTube channel. Feel free to shoot me a message. But it's been good to walk through this series, and I'm excited about the future episodes. Right now I have 13 planned. So got some good stuff to talk about, but hopefully this helps you, and look forward to doing another video soon. All right, see you guys.